mist is hanging low. Boots crunch the frost where the grasses grow. Rifle slung in a heart that's steady. The wild calls out and I'm already ready. The hunt is on and the woods don't lie. Tracks in the dirt under an open sky. It's a man, a plan, and the earth in sync. The hunt is on, take a breath, don't.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Inside Script Podcast. My name is Kenny. I'm your host. I'm excited to have you here today as we continue to talk about legendary bucks. And today we're going to talk about one that has a recent controversy, and that is the General. If you've never heard about the General, it is a Nebraska buck that the sheds were found of it a couple different times, but this deer was actually never been killed by a hunter. And it is considered the largest typical North American deer ever been found. And we're just going to talk about that today, the history of it and where it goes from here, and then also the more recent news and the controversy surrounding it. And so we're going to talk about that with Travis today, and we're going to cover all the parts that go along with this legendary buck. Just a couple things before we go. We want to let you know how you can support the Inside Spread. So if you have an opportunity to check in the show notes, we have some affiliates that we work with each week and every day. And so you can check them out by clicking links. That is Academy Sports, Raven Crossbow, and King's Camo. So if you are in the market shopping for those products that they have, you click that link and it will allow us to just make a little bit of a commission off of there, and it costs no extra money to you. Another way you can support us is just going to the insidespread.com, reading our articles, checking out what's going around there. But also you can head over to our Facebook and Instagram pages and check us out and see what we got going on there. If you could follow us, that would be great as well. And finally, if you have 30 seconds of your time, whether you're listening to this on Spotify or YouTube or Amazon Music or anywhere else you get your podcasts, if you could just rate us, give us 5 stars, give us a comment, whatever you would like to do, like us, share it with your friends. That would be so helpful, and it'll help us get us out to a bigger crowd. And we just appreciate the fans and all we do. And we'll catch you next time. And without further ado, here's the next legendary buck, the General. Thanks, everyone. Well, hello and welcome back to the Inside Script Podcast. My name is Kenny. I am your host. I'm excited to have Travis back here again today. Thank you for joining us, Travis.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
Well, this week we are going to talk about a very uncommon giant whitetail that has been nicknamed General. This is probably the world record deer in North America, but it was never killed. It was only been found through sheds. So we're just going to talk about that today. And Travis, give us a little introduction about the General.
Yeah, so this is a story that's fascinated me for a long time. And I think the key thing to remember here is that this buck predates all of the high fences. It predates the genetic engineering and everything. This is a set of sheds that was picked up in Nebraska, central Nebraska, in 1959. Basically, I think it was just a farmer or rancher. He was out. The story I heard is that he was out looking for a lost cow, and he just found these two gigantic sheds. Um, Back then, deer didn't mean as much, obviously. A lot of people were more into bird hunting. Um, you know, just there wasn't a lot of emphasis on big antlers. Um, but evidently, this farmer, he thought enough of them. He's like, those are pretty big. I'll keep those. Took them home, threw them in a barn, and they sat there for at least 20 some years, is at least what I'm hearing, um, before they were eventually put on an antler plaque, and then they spent another 20 years in the farmhouse.
Yeah.
So it kind of stirs the imagination a little bit because it's like, it's one of those things. How many big bucks like this are just sitting in an attic somewhere and we don't know about them, you know? Um, but it probably would have gone under the radar. It would probably still be in that farmhouse. But in the mid 1990s, there was an Oklahoma outfitter. His name was Tim Condit.
Mm-hmm.
And evidently he was just out scouting in central Nebraska. The story that I heard is that he was looking for new areas, to kind of expand his business, I guess. And he ended up talking to some people, and he asked them, have there been any big sheds or big bucks taken around here? And this one guy goes, I don't have anything like that, but you might want to go talk to my neighbor because my neighbor has a set of antlers that's bigger than any I had ever seen. Um, and this guy had been to there's a Sydney, Nebraska Cabela's, and every Cabela's has great big bucks in it. And so he told Tim, he's like, I've seen the big bucks at Cabela's. This thing has them beat. So obviously, Tim was really intrigued by this story, and so he went to go see this other landowner, and he took him into the house and he showed him the antlers. And I believe the quote from him was that his teeth nearly fell out when he saw them the first time, and it's easy to understand why. Uh, I've got some measurements here on this thing. So main beams were 32 inches. Uh, the right side eventually scored 104 and 3/8, and the left side was 102 and 2/8. So over 100 inches. Just for a little bit of perspective, I believe in Michigan to get into the commemorative Bucks of Michigan record book, it's a 100-inch minimum. So just one side of this buck would qualify, which is absolutely insane. And I believe one of the G3 tines or G2 tines is up over 14 inches. I mean, they're just huge. Um, and a lot of the mass measurements, I believe, are over 7 inches. Um, when you take all those measurements together, like it scores 190 some inches without an inside spread, which is just insane. Um, Obviously, we don't know what the inside spread is because we don't know how these antlers were sitting on the deer.
Yeah.
But, conservative estimates put, the final score somewhere in the 218 to 220 inch range, around 230 to 240 inches gross typical, which is just insane.
So as far as, North American records go, or even U.S. records go, where would this kind of fit as far as a record buck if it were, a normal deer?
Well, it would be the world record, assuming that it scored in that 218 inch range, because obviously Milo Hansen's buck, I believe, is 213 and 5/8, somewhere in that range. I know it's 213 inches, so it's over 5 inches bigger than that. Um, and kind of the big joke about it is that it's bigger than the Rompola buck's alleged score, so it's even bigger than that.
Yeah.
Just putting it into perspective, there's never been another deer that we know of uh, kind of in this class. It's just insanely huge.
Yeah. We have just a couple of pictures from Travis from replica that we're going to show you just so that you kind of grasp the size of what this deer might have looked like. So if you want to kind of take us through this just a little bit and just share a little bit about it, that'd be cool.
Yeah, so I took these pictures at the North American Whitetail Hall of Fame in Grass Lake, Michigan. There's a lot of replicas of this deer floating around. Um, One thing you can't see in the head-on shot is there's kind of a double brow tine on the one side, but otherwise it's really well balanced. It's just insanely huge. To see it in person, you just can't even put it into perspective. Yeah, right there you can see the kind of the split brow, um,
Mhm.
which gives it a little bit of extra character. Uh, but yeah, if you get the chance to see it in person, it is just an otherworldly deer. It changed hands several times after that. Tim did not buy the deer, uh,
Mhm.
but he knew somebody who would be interested, and eventually it went to like Cabela's Bass Pro. It's in the hands of a private collector now who paid $1 million for it, which I think is absolutely insane.
For sure.
More power to him, I guess.
If
Uh,
you got the money, I guess.
I guess so. If you have the money, I would not spend that much, but that's just me. Uh, Actually, I believe it's the Minnesota Bass Pro Cabela's has a bronze replica of this deer up front, so it's been immortalized in a statue as well.
I'm pretty sure I've been to that location, so I know exactly what you're talking about. There's also kind of a major controversy going around about these sheds, the originals. After this collector had purchased them, there's some more to the story. So what do we got?
Yeah, so like just in the past year or so, like after this deer was sold for $1 million, a whole new wrinkle to the story emerged. Somebody went on Facebook and they found some photos of this buck shortly after it was found in the farmhouse by Tim Condick, and uh, they end up showing that there was two extra points that are mysteriously missing. So I think it was either the G2s or the G3s had two stickers jutting out the sides, which obviously would have taken, an extra. They're estimating between 3 and 6 inches uh, off the score because that would be deducted as abnormal points under the Boone and Crockett system. Um,
Hmm.
and so the big mystery is who shaved the points off and when, and they don't really know. They have some suspicions. Um, Obviously, it happened sometime after Tim discovered the deer,
Hmm.
and between the first article in North American Whitetail that announced when it was found, because the first article in North American Whitetail does not have the stickers on it. Um, so yeah, somebody did something shady just to kind of boost the score a little bit more. Um, the interesting thing about this is, like you can break a set of antlers, and
Yeah.
you know they can still be considered for the record book if it's an accident. But
Hmm.
when somebody does something shady, when they do something deceptive like that, the record books are going to be like, uh, no, you're disqualified. And so I think right now, the North American Shed Hunters Club, I don't know that they've actually removed it from the record books, but I wonder if they're going to be considering doing that because, as far as I know, it's still number one,
Yeah.
because it was definitely altered by somebody. And
Yeah.
we don't know exactly how long those points are. Um, but yeah, they were definitely long enough that they would have taken something away from the final score. Um, the crazy thing about the deer is how big it is that there's a possibility that it would still be the world record even with those deductions. We just don't know, because we
Yeah.
don't know the inside spread and we don't know how long those points are. But it's just wild that a deer from the 60s is still making headlines in the hunting world like that.
Yeah. 40 or what is that, Aiden? We're way later now, we're 65 years later and still
Yeah.
making news. uh, Interestingly, does would those points, obviously we have no idea what the length size or anything is, and I don't know enough about the Boone and Crockett rules to know, or any shed hunting rules, but would it make it a non-typical if they were abnormal?
No, I don't think so. And I think even the Milo Hansen buck has, if you look at that one, it's got, plenty of little stickers. And I think it's kind of impossible for a buck to get to a certain size without having some junk points on it.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not enough to like make it a non-typical. It's not like uh there was the Johnny King buck. I don't know if you remember that one. That was a big controversy where they ruled that the 2 points shared a common base, um, which I still don't agree with that one. That one should have been a record.
Hmm.
Um, and it ended up knocking the, you know, final score from over 200 inches down to like 170 because they ruled that these 2 points shared a common base. As far as I know, the general doesn't have anything like that. It's just these two little points that would definitely be a little bit more of a deduction. Um, but yeah, there's thought in the whitetail world that, it may not hurt it as much as you think. Um, we'll just never know. That's the thing,
Yeah.
is we don't know who shaved the points off, and we don't know why or when. Um,
Yeah.
Obviously, they felt it was enough that they had to get rid of them. Uh, it's just an interesting mystery that we're never going to know the answer to, because I guess the original owner, the guy who found them, he's passed away now, because they wanted to talk to him and they just they can't figure it out. So
Yeah. Yeah. Especially without knowing what the inside spread is, you can't, you don't know what, we all assume based on angle and stuff what it could be, but you never know where those antlers were exactly coming out of his head. So,
The conservative estimates for the spread are 23 to 24 inches, which is huge in itself.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, we will never know for sure certain.
that's super cool. Like I said, it's just very interesting that somebody would purchase it for $1 million, and then this new controversy pops up, and you know, is it even worth that much money anymore? Well, I mean, it may not have been in the first place, so it's kind of interesting that this controversial nature has come around this buck. Is there any other points that you think about when you're thinking about this story and what's going on with this buck?
So the other interesting story within the past year, and I don't have all the details on this either, but a second set of sheds has popped up from this buck. Um, and they were actually picked up in 1963. And so the story with this is very interesting. There was a guy who was out pheasant hunting and he jumped this buck and it stood up and it only had one antler. And apparently, as it ran away, the other antler fell off. And so the guy went to go check it out and he found that antler and he found the other side nearby. Um, and I don't know how somebody tied this into the general because the two sets of sheds look dramatically different.
Hmm.
It's really clear that the deer was on its way down because it has a lot more abnormal points.
Hmm.
Um, it just looks a lot more non-typical. It's much smaller than the first set, which would make sense because, at this point we're talking about, a deer that may have been, close to 9, 10 years old.
Yeah.
Um, but somebody tied the two together somehow. I don't know if it was proximity in the time or what it was, but they decided to do DNA testing on it. And they found it was a 100% match, that it was the same deer, which is just wild. So at least one person did see this buck on the hoof near the end of its life.
Hmm.
Um, that's another thing I forgot to mention early in the story is that uh, the guy who originally found it said that there were three bucks of this size running around together at the same time, which I feel like that's a little bit of a stretch. Uh,
Yes.
I find it hard to believe there's three of this size, but uh, yeah, that's like the only other confirmed sighting we have of the deer is the guy who saw it dropping the antler later in life, and the guy who originally found it. Other than that, there's no other confirmed sightings of it. As far as we know, it wasn't shot by anyone, so it must have died of natural causes. I mean, they don't get to that size, by accident.
Yeah.
It was definitely a smart, smart old deer.
And
Um,
healthy. I mean,
and we'll never
yeah.
know what happened.
I mean, it kind of also fits, the lore of the Midwest of, kind of the southern Midwest there of Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois. Those areas are just, they're known for their humongous bucks. So kind of fits that lore too. So if it was confirmed to kind of be in that similar area in Nebraska, then yeah, and then also the genetic testing easily confirms that yeah, that was for sure the buck.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting is like when you're talking about big buck states, like I don't think Nebraska is necessarily always at the top of everyone's radar. Like people know there's big bucks there, and I got curious, and so I was looking at just kind of the record books for Nebraska. It was like Nebraska Fish and Game Trophy Database, and so like
Hmm.
like the absolute biggest buck in Nebraska, according to theirs, is 199 and 2/8 inches, and then their second place is 198 and 2/8 inches. Um, so Nebraska hasn't produced a lot of 200-inch, typicals like this, and this was just beyond you
Yeah.
know, what anyone has ever seen in a buck like this before. And so I find that very interesting, that these things can just kind of pop up everywhere like that. Not to get too off topic, but people always say like the Rampolla buck couldn't happen in Michigan, but it's like every once in a while there are absolute freaks of nature
Yeah.
that pop up where you don't expect them, you know. And I think that this buck is a good example of that. Another good example of that is the world record smallmouth bass. I mean, That fish weighed probably 12 pounds, and no one's gotten anywhere near that since then. It's just a freak of nature. And I think that's what uh, the general was. It was just a freak of nature,
Mhm.
just insanely huge before people were planting food plots, and everything with nutrients and stuff, trying to get deer to grow bigger antlers. I mean, he did it 100% naturally. It wasn't messed with. It just goes to show that they can grow insanely huge.
Yeah, I mean, you got the issue of like, genetics are so random that it could have just been a perfect combination of genetics, but also you're looking at a deer that clearly wasn't hunted very much or often, so then he's probably not pressured or stressed a ton. So there's still a lot of variables put in there. You're living potentially, if you're that healthy as a deer, you're probably living in an area that has lots of nutrition and food in the area and the habitats, right? So there's just genetics are a huge piece of it, obviously, but in general, I'm just thinking about what it takes to make big deer. Then those other features, with habitat are probably were probably really good, uh, in general, and he was safe.
Yeah, and remember 1959, I mean, sure, people kept antlers, from back in the day, like when we talked about the Jim Jordan buck,
Mhm.
he was obviously very excited because of how big those antlers were, but it wasn't as big of a deal back then. Hunters weren't out looking for big antlers necessarily as much. I mean, I'm sure there were some guys who did, but I think most people who were hunting deer were just after meat back then.
Yeah,
That's just how it was. Uh, so it's kind of a different time. And I mean, the guy didn't even bring the antlers into the house for 20 years. He left them out in the barn, which I can't even imagine that. It's a wonder that
his
they
wife
didn't get
didn't want
gnawed
any
up by,
antlers in the house.
yeah, yeah. It's a wonder they didn't get gnawed up by rodents in the barn. I
Yeah,
mean, they could have easily eaten them down to nothing, and then we wouldn't have this story.
yeah, yeah. It's a super cool story. It's just another one of those really cool big buck stories that we're going to try to keep covering over and over again. Keep looking into these cool stories, and yeah, the possibility of something like this happening seems like it's so small, and that but here we are, talking about this thing. Like we said, it's 60 some years later, and we're still talking about it. So it's clearly something special and something that's why we want to talk about them.
I think this one really stirs the imagination because this is one that definitely got away. I
Yeah,
mean, and we'll never, never know. It's just an absolutely legendary deer of gargantuan proportions that, was probably the biggest that's ever walked the earth.
yeah,
Unless there's another one laying in a garage somewhere that gets discovered. It does happen.
yeah.
There was one found in New York, I think like 5 years ago. Uh, they found like a nearly 200-inch buck at a garage sale. So it does happen occasionally. There's probably still some more out there hidden. I don't know if there's another that's the size of the general, but
Yeah.
it's fun to imagine that. Maybe someday I'll be at like a flea market or something and I'll come across the next general. It's fun to dream.
Yeah, for sure. And if you ever come across this type of buck in the woods, you better you better take your chance and see if you can knock it
Like
down.
like we were talking before this thing, I don't even think I could get a shot off at this thing. I would be shaking so too bad.
For sure. All right. Well, this kind of wraps up our buck story on the general. Travis, what do you think we should cover next when we're talking about these big buck stories?
Oh man, there's a bunch of bucks we could talk about. We could talk about pulling the horn buck. That's another one that predates all the genetic engineering. Another kind of long lost buck. Um, yeah, we kind of touched on Johnny King. We could talk about that. We could talk about the Rompola buck if you want.
Yeah.
That opens up a whole other can of worms on that.
Yeah.
Um,
That's awesome. It seems like we have plenty of stories to talk about and bucks to cover, and it'll be good to continue to knock some of these out and learn about what these where these bucks come from, what their story is, and everything that goes along with it. So just thank you again for joining us today, and we'll catch you again on the next episode.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Travis.
Where the air smells sweet, echoes of the woods, where the heartbeats meet, freedom runs wild under nature's dome, down by the pine, it feels like home. Crisp wind whispers through the autumn gold, stories of the land, both new and old. Tracks in the dirt, the trail calls my name. Out here in the wild, it's all just the same. Down by the pines, where the air smells sweet,